Alright, let's talk about some life functions. These are things that we need in order to survive as a living entity. We need to be able to maintain boundaries. So we need to be able to control what goes in and out of our body, but also in and out of our cells inside of the body. So we want to separate the inside from the outside. The skin, for example, protects us from drying out, from bacteria, from heat, sunlight, chemicals, and so forth. Then the other thing is important is movement. Movement both of our body through the world, but also moving objects around with our hands. That's all under movements, and that's all very important for us to survive. And then we also have internal movements, for example, the food moving through the gut, or the lungs expanding as the diaphragm contracts. Those are also very important to survive. The system also needs to be responsive, or we can call that irritable. So when we have a change in the outside or the inside, we need to react to it. For example, we cut our finger, we need to pull the finger away, or we touch a hot stove and automatically we retract the finger. We don't even think about it because it's a reflex. But that's what we describe under responsible or irritable. It does not mean you're pissy. It just means your system is reactive. Digestion refers to the breakdown of food items into small enough molecules that we can be absorbing them into the bloodstream. Again, we don't do that, we don't get energy, we won't survive. Then we have this word called metabolism. And metabolism are all chemical reactions that occur within a body cell. That includes breaking down substances into the simple building blocks or also making larger substances out of them. For example, we eat a piece of meat, we break it down into amino acids, we absorb the amino acids, and then inside the body we can rebuild protein out of that, the proteins that we need. Excretion, well, pooping is quite important. We need to remove waste from our system, and we can do that through multiple systems. We have the fecal system, we can poop out stuff, we can pee out liquid waste through urine, or we can sweat the substances through skin. We can also get rid of gases, substances through the lungs. God, this never ends, huh? So we have the next one is reproduction. Well, in order to sustain life, we need to make offsprings. Two cells, well, one cell divides into two daughter cells, or the human makes sperm and eggs, and they combine and they create an offspring of a human. That's in reproduction. As sexy as that sounds that way. Growth is important, that we can grow in size, we can increase in size. But also, normally that is accompanied with increase in numbers of cells that compose a body. Well, those are the life functions. Now, we have to talk about what we need to survive as needs. We need food, we need nutrients. No food, no energy, no life. We have macronutrients, those are our carbohydrates, our proteins and our fats. We have micronutrients, those are our minerals and our vitamins. And then water is quite important. Oxygen is also important because it helps the food release the energy that is stored in the food. So oxygen helps us make energy out of food. We are pretty restricted in the body temperature that we can have. We want it to be around 37 degrees Celsius. If it's too low, we'll slow or stop the metabolic cellular reaction. And if it's too hot, it will make them so fast that the body can't function and protein will be broken down in the heat. Atmospheric pressure is not that easy to understand. It's the force that is exerted on the surface of the body by weight of the air. That's the atmospheric pressure. So we can have high pressure where we have more molecules floating around, or we can have low pressure and we have less molecules floating around. Our breathing depends on the atmospheric pressure, what goes in and out of the lungs. Good. This brings us to this most interesting concept of homeostasis. That's a big word, but that basically means it's the ability of our system to maintain a normal, a relatively stable internal environment of the body, even though the outside is constantly changing. So we need to be able to adapt to the changing outside and keep a stable inside, and that's accomplished via homeostasis. Homeo means the same, and stasis means standing still. This is a dynamic equilibrium that needs a lot of controls to adapt to the constant change. Again, an example could be the outside's cold or hot, but the inside needs to stay the same. So we need to have mechanisms to make sure the inside of the body temperature remains the same. That's quite complicated. So we do that mostly through a negative feedback mechanism. If it gets too hot, the body's AC needs to cool it down. We do that through sweating. That's a negative feedback mechanism. Something is too out of balance, we do the opposite, that's the negative part, and bring it back into balance. It's too hot, we create cooling. If it's too cold, we have to put on the body's heater. We create heating. We do that through shivering, for example, so the muscles keep our body warm. So the use of the opposite action in order to keep the inside stable is what the negative feedback system is. Let's look at the components. We have a stimulus that is produced, and that produces a change, and so we're out of bounds, we're out of balance. The receptor detects a change. It sends information via the afferent pathway into the brain along the pathway, goes along nerves. And then we have a control center, that's usually the brain or the spinal cord, and they analyze the data and then they make a decision, and then they send information out, and that's the output. And the information is sent along a pathway that we call the efferent pathway. These are words we need to sort of learn. Efferent stands for exit in my head, so it exits the brain, so that's how I remember that one. And then we move to the effector, and that's usually a muscle or a gland, and that needs to have an effect in terms of creating the opposite of what the stimulus was out of bounds about. And so we create homeostasis again, and we return to a level that is acceptable to the inside of the body of whatever we have been measuring. That could be blood sugar, for example. All right. Well, then we also have positive feedback mechanisms, and that is when we have a stimulus and the stimulus keeps getting enhanced to create an effect. So it's not really balancing, but we have some necessary actions that need that. For example, childbirth, when the uterus contracts, it can't just contract once and then it's done with it, because the baby's still inside the womb. So it needs to contract stronger and stronger and stronger until the baby's expelled. I know, again, very sexy sounding. But that's an example of a positive feedback mechanism. And once the baby is expelled, once the baby is born, then we don't have to keep doing that, but we can stop it at that point. The same is true for the milk letdown mechanism when the mother is nursing the baby. And also in blood clotting, we have a similar positive feedback mechanism. Very controlled, because these can get out of hand And then what happens is a disease process usually takes place. So many disease processes, such as cancer, develop through this positive feedback mechanism. All right, well, I think that's good for right now.